When I finally sold my house in our tightly controlled HOA neighborhood, I thought the nightmare of constant nitpicking was over. But of course, Karen, the self-appointed queen of the Homeowners Association, wasn't about to let me leave peacefully. The day I hired movers and packed up, she stormed over with her clipboard and told me, "You can't move out without filing a request and getting HOA approval." I laughed. Who on earth needs permission to leave their own home? Apparently, Karen thought she was the sheriff of the block. Within an hour, 2 police cruisers pulled up, lights flashing. She had called 911, claiming I was abandoning my property illegally. The officers looked a little embarrassed when I calmly handed them the deed transfer paperwork. Still, Karen kept shouting about bylaws and rules of the community. Then my son, who had been helping me pack, stepped forward. He pulled out his badge, Special Agent FBI. The look on Karen's face was priceless. He explained to the officers that filing a false police report is a crime, and that HOAs don't actually have legal authority over someone's right to move. The cops quickly left, reminding Karen that wasting emergency resources could land her in serious trouble. Karen shuffled back to her house in silence. As for me, I drove away with a smile, knowing I'd finally escaped the HOA drama, and grateful that my son's badge shut her down once and for all.
Homeowners associations, commonly known as HOAs, were originally designed with a very practical purpose: to maintain the shared spaces of a neighborhood, ensure that common areas are taken care of, and protect property values by setting reasonable community standards. In theory, this idea makes sense. When everyone contributes to upkeep, when lawns are maintained, and when rules are applied fairly, the entire community benefits. However, the reality for many homeowners is far different from the brochure image of neighborhood harmony. What often emerges instead is a culture of control, where a handful of individuals interpret bylaws with unnecessary strictness and attempt to extend their influence far beyond what is legally permissible. This is where the absurdity of HOA overreach comes into play. The problem begins when an HOA board or even a single power-driven member believes that their authority is unlimited. Instead of focusing on essentials like making sure shared spaces are safe or that structural guidelines are followed, they begin micromanaging personal property and personal lives. Residents find themselves fined for the color of their front door being slightly off the approved palette, or warned about grass being 2 inches taller than an arbitrary limit. In extreme cases, as in the story of Karen, these individuals go so far as to believe they can control whether someone is allowed to move out of their home, as if leaving a neighborhood requires permission. The absurdity lies in mistaking administrative oversight for ownership rights. HOAs are not government entities, and they certainly do not have jurisdiction over decisions that fundamentally belong to homeowners. Educationally, this highlights the importance of understanding the legal foundation of HOAs. They operate under contractual agreements. When you purchase a home in an HOA community, you agree to abide by certain rules laid out in the covenants, conditions, and restrictions, or CC&Rs. However, these documents do not and cannot override state and federal laws. An HOA may regulate the height of your fence, but it cannot stop you from selling your house, changing your residency, or exercising other fundamental property rights. This is where some HOA boards cross the line. They confuse their limited regulatory role with absolute control. When that happens, enforcement becomes less about maintaining standards and more about exerting personal authority. The absurdity also becomes visible in the misuse of resources. When an HOA member calls the police over trivial matters such as a homeowner moving out, it illustrates how petty enforcement escalates into public disruption. Police officers and emergency responders are tasked with addressing genuine safety threats, not resolving disputes over bylaw interpretations. Involving law enforcement in private community squabbles not only wastes valuable resources, but also erodes trust between residents and institutions. The fact that some individuals believe this behavior is justified underscores just how inflated their sense of power can become under the umbrella of an HOA. Beyond the immediate disruption, overreach harms community relationships. Instead of fostering cooperation and neighborly spirit, HOAs that indulge in absurd rules and strict policing foster resentment, hostility, and distrust. Homeowners begin to feel like they are living under surveillance rather than in a community. The idea that someone would feel entitled to dictate when or how their neighbor is allowed to leave their own property is a powerful example of this dynamic. It goes against the principle of personal freedom that property ownership is supposed to represent. Instead of creating stability, such behavior creates tension and conflict, which can eventually lead to lawsuits, community breakdowns, and even declining property values, the very thing HOAs are supposed to prevent. In an educational sense, the lesson here is twofold. First, homeowners must learn to recognize the boundaries of HOA authority and know their rights. Understanding where HOA power stops and where legal ownership begins is crucial for resisting unnecessary overreach. Second, individuals must recognize that power, when left unchecked, often attracts those who will abuse it. This does not mean all HOAs are bad. Many operate fairly and responsibly. But the absurd cases remind us why oversight, balance, and informed homeowners are essential. When residents know their rights, they are less likely to be intimidated by a Karen with a clipboard and more prepared to push back against rules that cross the line into absurdity. Ultimately, the absurdity of HOA overreach teaches us a broader lesson about authority in any context. Rules are meant to serve people, not control them unnecessarily. When someone in power mistakes regulation for domination, they not only make themselves look ridiculous, they also undermine the integrity of the very system they claim to protect. That is why it is so important for homeowners to stay informed, push back respectfully when rules go too far, and remember that ownership comes with freedoms that no HOA, however controlling, can ever take away.
When you buy a home, you are not just purchasing walls, land, and a roof. You are also securing a set of legal rights that protect your ownership. Many homeowners mistakenly assume that signing into a community with a homeowners association means surrendering all decision-making power to the HOA board, but that is not true. Knowing your rights as a homeowner is essential not only for protecting your investment, but also for maintaining your independence in the face of unreasonable demands. Understanding where your responsibilities end and your freedoms begin helps prevent conflicts and ensures that no overzealous board member or neighbor can intimidate you into compliance with rules that are either misapplied or outright invalid. At the most basic level, your rights stem from property law, which in the United States is governed primarily by state statutes and reinforced by constitutional protections. Owning property gives you the right to occupy it, lease it, sell it, and make reasonable changes to it, provided those changes do not violate zoning laws or safety codes. An HOA agreement, usually documented in the Covenants, Conditions, and Restrictions, CC&Rs, does impose additional responsibilities, such as maintaining the exterior in a certain condition or contributing dues for shared amenities. However, an HOA's authority does not erase your underlying ownership rights. For example, while an HOA may regulate what color you paint your fence, it cannot forbid you from transferring ownership of your property or moving out whenever you see fit. This is why it is crucial to read and understand the governing documents before buying into an HOA-controlled community. Too often, homeowners either skip this step or skim through without realizing what they are agreeing to. The CC&Rs, bylaws, and rules and regulations outline what the HOA can and cannot do. By familiarizing yourself with these documents, you're less likely to be caught off guard by enforcement actions.
More importantly, you can distinguish between legitimate requirements and demands that overstep legal authority. For example, an HOA may have the right to fine you for leaving trash cans out too long, but it cannot deny your right to sell your home, nor can it require you to seek permission to vacate it. Knowing your rights also involves understanding the process of enforcement. In most states, HOAs must follow due process before imposing fines or taking corrective action. This means providing notice of the alleged violation, giving you an opportunity to respond, and offering a hearing before penalties are imposed. If an HOA skips these steps and moves straight to punishment, it may be violating its own governing documents or state law. As a homeowner, you have the right to contest unfair enforcement through appeals, mediation, or in some cases, the court system. Many states have agencies or legal frameworks specifically designed to handle HOA disputes, which provide additional layers of protection for homeowners. Another critical right often overlooked is the right to transparency. HOAs are required to keep records of their finances, decisions, and meetings, and homeowners generally have the right to review these documents. This transparency ensures that boards cannot make arbitrary decisions without accountability. If you ever feel an HOA board is making questionable demands, reviewing the official records can help determine whether the board is acting within its authority. Transparency laws protect against secretive decision-making and remind homeowners that they are not powerless participants but stakeholders in their communities. Perhaps the most empowering right is the ability to organize and vote. HOAs are governed by boards elected by the homeowners themselves. If you believe the rules are being applied unfairly or the board is misusing its authority, you and your fellow residents can vote in new leadership. This democratic element means that HOAs are not dictatorships, even if some individuals act as though they are. By exercising your right to participate in board elections, attend meetings, and voice concerns, you can help shape the policies that directly affect your neighborhood. The importance of knowing your rights extends beyond the context of avoiding fines or resisting unreasonable rules. It is about protecting your peace of mind and ensuring that your home remains a place of comfort rather than a source of constant stress. Too many homeowners suffer silently under the mistaken belief that the HOA is all-powerful, when in reality its authority is carefully limited. Education is the antidote to fear. Once you know what your HOA can and cannot do, you are equipped to respond with confidence instead of intimidation. Ultimately, homeownership should be a source of pride and stability. HOAs can play a constructive role in protecting communities, but only when they operate within the boundaries of the law and their governing documents. As a homeowner, your greatest defense against overreach is knowledge. By understanding your rights and refusing to yield to unreasonable demands, you not only protect your own interests, but also contribute to creating a fairer, more balanced community where authority serves the people, rather than the other way around.
Authority, when used responsibly, serves as a framework for order and fairness. However, when it is misused, especially in community settings such as homeowners associations, it creates chaos, resentment, and legal complications. The misuse of authority by individuals or boards who believe they have unlimited power often results in unnecessary conflicts, wasted resources, and a breakdown of trust. Understanding the consequences of misusing authority not only helps homeowners recognize when boundaries are being crossed, but also underscores why balance and accountability are so essential in governance. One of the most immediate consequences of misusing authority is the erosion of credibility. When an HOA board or an individual member oversteps, issuing demands or threats that lack a legal or contractual basis, they undermine their own position of leadership. Residents begin to question whether rules are being enforced fairly or whether they are being selectively applied to target specific individuals. This selective enforcement not only breeds hostility, but can also open the association up to legal challenges. Courts have repeatedly held that HOAs must apply rules consistently to all members. Any hint of favoritism, discrimination, or personal vendetta damages the integrity of the entire organization. Another major consequence is the misuse of public resources, particularly when private disputes are escalated to law enforcement. Calling the police over matters that fall squarely within the realm of civil disagreements, such as a neighbor moving out or minor property disputes, wastes taxpayer money and strains community police relations. Law enforcement officers are trained to respond to genuine threats to safety and security. When they are dragged into frivolous disputes, it not only distracts them from urgent responsibilities, but also creates frustration for both the officers and the individuals wrongly targeted. In some cases, knowingly filing a false police report can itself be a crime, carrying penalties ranging from fines to jail time. Thus, misusing authority in this way can backfire dramatically on those attempting to wield it as a weapon. Beyond legal risks, there is also the issue of community cohesion. When authority is misapplied, neighbors stop seeing their HOA or community leaders as protectors of property values and instead view them as enforcers of unnecessary control. This creates a climate of fear and resentment, where residents feel watched, judged, and harassed in their own homes. Instead of uniting the neighborhood around shared goals, misuse of authority divides it, turning what should be a collaborative environment into a hostile one. In the long run, this atmosphere can drive down community engagement and even reduce property values, as potential buyers may shy away from neighborhoods with reputations for unreasonable or aggressive HOA boards. The misuse of authority can also escalate into costly legal battles. Homeowners who feel their rights have been trampled are increasingly willing to challenge their HOAs in court. Lawsuits over improper fines, violations of due process, or harassment are not uncommon, and they can be expensive for both the association and the individual members. Because HOA boards are funded by homeowners' dues, legal missteps often mean the entire community bears the financial burden of defending actions that should never have been taken in the first place. This creates additional resentment among residents, especially when they're forced to pay for legal defenses tied to rules they never agreed with or supported. From an educational perspective, it is also worth noting the psychological consequences of authority misused. People subjected to unreasonable control often feel powerless, anxious, or trapped in their own homes. A neighborhood, which should serve as a place of safety and comfort, becomes instead a source of stress. In extreme cases, this kind of environment can affect mental health, leading to long-term dissatisfaction and an urge to move away. Ironically, when people leave because of oppressive HOAs, it undermines the very stability that HOAs claim to protect. The key lesson here is that authority is not about domination, but stewardship. Whether in an HOA, a workplace, or any institution, authority exists to maintain fairness, protect rights, and create an environment where everyone benefits. When individuals misuse authority for personal power trips or petty disputes, the damage ripples outward. It harms trust, wastes resources, invites legal consequences, and corrodes the sense of community. Homeowners must be vigilant in recognizing these patterns and be willing to stand up against them, not out of defiance, but out of a commitment to balance and fairness. Ultimately, misusing authority is unsustainable. While it may temporarily intimidate others, it inevitably collapses under its own weight, either through legal repercussions, loss of credibility, or collective pushback from those affected. The healthier path is always one of responsible leadership, enforcing rules fairly, respecting boundaries, and remembering that authority is a tool for service, not control. When communities embrace this understanding, they thrive. When they ignore it, they fracture.
In every community, workplace, or social environment, bullies emerge when they believe they can exploit fear, uncertainty, or silence. In the context of homeowners associations, bullies often come in the form of individuals who exaggerate their authority, issue threats, or attempt to shame others into compliance.
Standing up to these figures is not just about personal pride. It is an essential step in preserving fairness, dignity, and community balance. Learning how to address bullies constructively and confidently can transform a toxic environment into one where respect and cooperation flourish. The first thing to understand is that bullies thrive on intimidation. They rely on the assumption that others either do not know their rights or will not challenge unfair behavior. In an HOA setting, for example, a board member or neighbor may issue false claims about what rules allow or insist that arbitrary approval is required for everyday decisions. If no one questions these claims, they become de facto rules, even when they are not legally valid. This is why knowledge and confidence are powerful tools. By calmly questioning demands, asking for documentation, or pointing out inconsistencies, homeowners can strip away the illusion of absolute power that bullies try to project. Standing up to bullies is not about aggression or escalation. It is about asserting boundaries clearly and respectfully. When someone attempts to misuse authority, a firm response backed by facts can be more effective than emotional reactions. For instance, if a neighbor insists you cannot move out without permission, asking them to cite the specific bylaw or statute forces them to confront the baselessness of their claim. More often than not, bullies back down when they realize they cannot support their threats with evidence. Education, preparation, and composure are therefore key elements of standing tall in the face of intimidation. Another important aspect of confronting bullies is the ripple effect it creates. When one person stands up, it empowers others to do the same. Communities often remain silent under the influence of domineering individuals simply because no one wants to be the first to push back. However, when residents witness someone calmly asserting their rights and refusing to yield to unfair treatment, it inspires confidence in others. This collective courage gradually shifts the balance of power, showing bullies that their tactics no longer work and that the community will not tolerate intimidation. Standing up to bullies also prevents long-term harm. Left unchecked, bullies tend to escalate their behavior, pushing boundaries further each time they go unchallenged. What begins as a small overreach can evolve into a pattern of control that affects everyone in the neighborhood. By addressing the issue early, residents not only protect themselves, but also safeguard the larger community from falling into an unhealthy cycle of dominance and submission. In this sense, speaking out is both an act of self-defense and a service to others. There is also a personal growth component to confronting bullies. Many people underestimate their ability to stand up for themselves, assuming they lack the strength or authority to do so. Yet the act of facing intimidation builds confidence and resilience. It teaches that one's voice has power, and that fairness often prevails when people refuse to be silenced. These lessons extend beyond HOA disputes. They apply to workplaces, schools, and any environment where power dynamics can be abused. Learning to stand firm without hostility cultivates a lifelong skill of assertive communication and boundary setting. Of course, standing up to bullies doesn't always mean acting alone. Support systems are invaluable. Whether it's consulting a lawyer, joining forces with other residents, or reaching out to local authorities when necessary, strength in numbers makes it harder for bullies to isolate or target individuals. Even the simple act of discussing concerns with neighbors can reveal that others are experiencing the same intimidation, creating opportunities for collective action. Unity sends a strong message that bullying behavior will not be tolerated and that fairness, not fear, will guide the community. Ultimately, the power of standing up to bullies lies in reclaiming control. Bullies only succeed when people surrender it to them. By asserting one's rights, setting boundaries, and refusing to be cowed by threats, homeowners reinforce the principle that authority must be exercised fairly and within limits. The process may feel uncomfortable at first, but the long-term benefits, peace of mind, stronger communities, and healthier relationships are invaluable. The story of confronting an HOA bully may seem specific, but its lesson is universal. When individuals stand up for themselves and others, they dismantle the foundation of intimidation. They replace fear with respect, isolation with solidarity, and unfairness with justice. In doing so, they not only protect their own rights, but also help create an environment where everyone can live without the shadow of unnecessary control. Standing up to bullies, then, is not simply about resistance. It is about restoring balance and ensuring that authority serves people rather than oppresses them.